Jung showed us that the path to healing begins with a simple yet challenging step: learning to choose oneself in a world that constantly pressures us to look to others, conform, seek approval, and meet others' expectations. We live in an endless race to be recognized, loved, and valued, but rarely pause to ask ourselves, what do I want? What do I truly need to feel happy and complete? The answer to this question never lies in the external world, not in a boss's praise, a parent's approval, or a partner's admiration. It's always inside, in that quiet yet persistent part of ourselves that knows the truth, which we often silence because we fear being inconvenient, too much, or different. Choosing oneself is not selfishness, as many are accustomed to thinking. It is finally turning to the most important person in your life, yourself. It's giving yourself the attention, care, and respect you so easily give to others, but seldom reserve for yourself. Jung warned that most of our emotional wounds, anxieties, and disappointments stem from a disconnect with our essence. For years, we play roles like the perfect employee, the accommodating partner, the ideal parent. At some point, we suddenly realize we've forgotten who we truly are. We become strangers to ourselves. This creates a void inside that we try to fill with work, relationships, shopping, social media. But it never disappears because the root issue is not an external lack, but an internal loss. Here's what is important to understand. Everything repressed, everything denied to ourselves, everything hidden even from ourselves, doesn't vanish. It becomes a shadow that will manifest sooner or later through repeating relationship patterns, self-destructive habits, sudden crises, or a persistent feeling of emptiness that remains even when everything seems fine. You might ask yourself for years, why doesn't my life change? Why do I keep making the same mistakes? Why am I surrounded by people who don't appreciate me? The answer is always the same. The problem isn't external, it's internal. Until you start listening to yourself, the world will mirror your internal state. If there is chaos within, there will be chaos outside. Healing begins not when you find the right partner, the ideal job, or a new social circle, but when you stop seeking salvation outside and decide to look within. Imagine your life is a mirror of your internal world. If you are constantly surrounded by people who don't appreciate you, if you feel like your energy is drained by toxic relationships or meaningless activities, if you repeatedly find yourself in situations where you are used, undervalued, or ignored, it's not a coincidence. Your subconscious mind is screaming, "Stop. Something is wrong here." The real question is whether you're ready to hear this. Most people prefer not to notice these signals because meeting oneself is perhaps the hardest thing there is. Admitting your wounds, fears, mistakes, and realizing that for many years you yourself allowed the pain to continue requires tremendous courage. But it's at this point of awareness where true transformation begins. You cannot heal if you continue to feed your wound. You cannot rid yourself of anxiety if you replay catastrophic scenarios in your mind every day. You cannot fill yourself up if you surround yourself with people who deplete you. You cannot gain confidence if you constantly wait for someone else to affirm your value. Jung spoke of individuation, the process in which we gradually free ourselves from the pressures of external expectations and return to ourselves. It doesn't mean withdrawing from the world and living in complete solitude. It means no longer waiting for others to tell you who you are, what to do, or how to live. Remember how many times you've abandoned your desires out of fear of judgment. How many times you've said yes when inside you screamed no. How many times have you ignored your intuition because you needed to be convenient? When you start choosing yourself, something incredible happens. You unlock a different level of attraction. You no longer settle for emotional crumbs. Don't wait for someone to fill your void. Don't try to fit into someone else's standards. You realize your value is not in pleasing others, but in being yourself. And then, gradually, the world around you starts to change. Relationships that once drained you lose their power. Situations that used to make you cry no longer feel catastrophic, not because the world changed, but because you changed. But this path isn't about instant metamorphosis. It requires the courage to say no to what destroys you, even if it disappoints someone. It requires patience to learn to notice your true desires beneath layers of external conditioning. It requires honesty, especially with yourself. Jung reminded us, the cost of ignoring oneself is too high. We pay for it with anxiety, fatigue, feelings of being lost, a life that seems to belong to someone else. But when you choose yourself, something remarkable happens. A world that once seemed hostile becomes gentler. Conflicts that once drowned you like a swamp lose their power because you've stopped fighting yourself. Healing isn't a destination you can arrive at once and relax. It's a daily choice, choosing your peace over others' approval, truth over convenient lies, yourself even when it's scary. The calm and certainty you've sought in others have always been within you. You just needed to allow yourself to feel it. You deserve a life where you don't constantly look at others. You can and should. The only question is whether you are ready to take the first step, for the path to oneself is the only one truly worth taking. If we avoid our wounds, the world will reflect them back to us repeatedly, like an echo in an empty room, until we finally decide to turn around and face them. Many try to bypass this process, for it requires the courage to acknowledge bitter truths, that what we called love often turned out to be dependency, that under the mask of friendship was a mutually beneficial exchange, that most of our decisions were dictated by the fear of not being good enough. But when you begin to choose yourself, a shift occurs. You stop bargaining with your conscience, putting up with things that eat away at you piece by piece, justifying the unjustifiable. That's when the most daunting part begins. People leave, not because you've changed, but because your boundaries have changed. Those who seemed like an integral part of your life suddenly dissolve into the past, sometimes without explanations. What initially feels like a painful loss later becomes freedom. For each closed door leaves space for something real. This transition is never easy. Our subconscious clings to the familiar, even if it's toxic, like a person in a storm clings to the wreckage of a sinking ship. We endure toxic relationships, humiliating jobs, draining friendships for years, because fear of the unknown paralyzes more than familiar pain. But it's precisely at this choice between remaining in a familiar hell or stepping into the unknown where true transformation is born. Letting go doesn't mean instantly forgetting or pretending you feel nothing. It means accepting that you cannot force another person to value you, that your happiness does not depend on those unwilling to share your worth, and that the only one truly responsible for your well-being is you. In that moment, the world splits into two: those who continue seeking outside what they lost inside, and those who find the courage to begin the path to healing. Jung called this the road to wholeness, the only path truly worth taking. When you choose yourself, something amazing happens. Your relationships get filtered by life itself. People accustomed to your constant giving without reciprocity quietly disappear. In their place appear those who see the real you, not because you've changed, but because you've stopped settling for half measures. In such relationships, there is no room for sacrifice, only mutual enrichment. But most people never reach this point. The reason is simple. Confronting the shadow is painful. It's not just about losing others, but facing that part of yourself that has allowed poor treatment for years. It's much easier to blame the partner, the boss, fate, than to acknowledge that everything happening to us is a reflection of our internal permissions. Jung warned that the repressed parts of our personality don't disappear. They become the shadow of an invisible puppeteer, controlling us through unexplained fears, sudden breakdowns, compulsive patterns. When you start choosing yourself, the shadow gradually comes to light. You notice how you sabotage your own happiness, say yes where you should say no, tolerate what you should have long rejected, and run from relationships where you're genuinely valued. At this point, you make a choice. Continue living on autopilot, or take the helm. The first path is convenient, allowing for years of complaints about an unfair life, bad people, an unlucky fate. The second requires ruthless honesty. To acknowledge how often you've betrayed yourself, how often you gave precious time to those undeserving, why you settled for crumbs when you deserved a feast. But in that truth lies liberation. The pain of realization is temporary, unlike the eternal pain of self-deception. As Jung said, we cannot heal what we don't dare to see. But at the moment you meet your true self, without masks, without excuses, something clicks inside. You suddenly understand that life isn't a lottery but a mirror, that every choice, every yes and no, shapes reality, and you no longer need others' permission to be yourself. And then the most incredible part begins. You suddenly notice you no longer fit into old dramas. Your anxiety about the future is replaced by quiet confidence in yourself, and a new feeling settles in your chest. A lightness that can't be bought with money or begged from others. This is true freedom, when you finally understand. Everything you really need is already inside. You just have to allow yourself to take it. Are you ready to walk this path to the end, to dare to let go of what drags you down and open up to the possibilities of a true life? It won't be easy, but I'll be honest with you. It's worth it because when you start choosing yourself, everything changes. Emotional healing stops being an unattainable goal and becomes a natural process. The world, which once seemed hostile, suddenly reflects your inner state. And if there's peace inside, everything outside gains harmony. But be prepared. Once you start changing, the people around you will respond. Some will be happy for you. Others will start asking uncomfortable questions. And others, those for whom your convenient version was advantageous, will try to revert everything to the way it was. They will press on guilt, manipulate, remind you. You used to be different. This will be the hardest test, because you'll realize that not everyone is ready to accept your transformation. Many give up at this point, returning to old habits, to relationships that suffocate, to a life that diminishes them, all out of fear of losing the familiar, even if the familiar has long become toxic. But here's the truth you need to learn once and for all. If you have to shrink to fit into someone's life, that was never your place. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you truly are. He warned, not everyone will understand your path, but what matters is not their opinion, but your readiness to move forward, even if you have to walk alone for a while. Fear of loneliness is the main trap on the path to growth. We've been taught to think being alone means being insufficient, unloved, a failure. But the real problem is not loneliness, but the inability to be with oneself. Jung said that the path to wholeness requires a period of deep introspection, when we stop seeking outside what can only be found within. And once you learn to feel comfortable in your own company, you will stop settling for just anything to avoid silence. At this moment, many go through what Jung called the dark night of the soul, a time when the old collapses and the new hasn't yet formed. It's emptiness, uncertainty, a feeling as if the ground is slipping from under your feet. This is where most people fall, because the mind demands immediate answers, wants to cling to something. But true transformation occurs precisely in this interval, when you don't try to fill the void with old patterns, but allow yourself to simply be in it. And then comes the realization. Much of your personality was built around others. Your value depended on how needed, accepted, approved you were. And when these external supports vanish, the main question arises: who am I when no one is watching? The answer isn't in what you show the world, but in what is hidden even from you. In your shadows, wounds, suppressed desires, unacknowledged talents. When you stop running from yourself and honestly look into the mirror of your soul, a miracle happens. The need to please disappears. The fear of rejection vanishes, and for the first time in your life, you feel true freedom. But the world will test you. Past situations will return to see if you have really changed. People who once manipulated you will try to do it again. Here, you'll understand that you have truly changed, not because the world became different, but because your reaction is now different. You no longer need to justify yourself. You don't need to prove your worth. You understand that not all connections are eternal, and losing some people is not a tragedy, but a natural selection of the soul. The energy you once spent trying to be good enough for others is now directed at yourself. And although at first this may feel strange, it is the highest form of self-love. When you choose yourself, you begin to notice patterns you once ignored. Life stops feeling like a series of random events. It becomes a mirror of your internal world. Everything surrounding you, everything catching your attention in others, is a reflection of what lives within you. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What you hate in others is in you. What you admire in others is in you. This is both shadow and light. And when you accept this, healing becomes inevitable. You no longer fear loneliness because you know the most important journey is the journey to yourself. No matter the challenges life throws your way, you now understand. They aren't happening to you. They're happening for you. Every lesson, every loss, every encounter leads you to a deeper understanding of who you truly are. And in this knowledge is your true strength. If you repeatedly attract relationships where you feel undervalued, if you constantly find yourself in situations where you have to strain for others' attention, stop and ask yourself, what part of me still believes I'm not good enough? The answer never lies outside. It's hidden in your deep beliefs about yourself. When you start this inner work, something amazing happens. Life stops feeling like an obstacle course. Anxiety about the future dissolves because you gain a firm basis in yourself. Relationships no longer feel like battlefields. They become spaces for growth. And most importantly, you regain control over your own life. It doesn't mean everything will suddenly be perfect. Fears and doubts won't disappear. But now, you have the tools to not let them control you. You no longer act from a state of deficit. Your actions come from inner fullness. You don't need to desperately seek love because you understand. It has always been within you. Jung taught, the point is not to avoid pain, but to learn to incorporate it into your story. Real healing isn't about running from wounds, but turning them into wisdom. When you accept this, you stop living with past grievances and future anxieties. The only reality that starts to matter is the present. And this is where peace is born, not because problems disappear, but because you gain unshakable confidence. Whatever happens, you have the strength to get through it. Your value no longer depends on others' approval. It is based on the simple knowledge you are already enough. This is the main gift of choosing yourself. You not only reclaim time and energy, but something far more valuable: the right to be authentic. When you decide on this path, you suddenly realize that much of the suffering was not created by external circumstances, but by the stories you've been telling yourself for years. The story that to be loved, you must constantly earn it with effort. To gain acceptance, you must conform. That your value is the result of continually proving your usefulness. But as soon as you begin questioning these beliefs, the picture clarifies. You were never obligated to carry what isn't yours. Jung explained, the collective unconscious is filled with inherited patterns, unchecked ideas about love, success, duty, sacrifice. We absorb them from childhood, often without realizing, and then live out others' scenarios, thinking they are our own. Awakening begins with uncomfortable questions. Why do I believe what I believe? Why do I tolerate what pains me? To whom do these rules, by which I live, actually belong? Perhaps you grew up watching your parents sacrifice themselves without return for years, and now subconsciously think, love has to be painful. Maybe you were made to believe that relaxation is a shameful weakness, and now you can't unwind without feeling guilty. Or taught that a strong person can endure everything, which is why it's so hard to let go, even of obviously toxic situations. But here's the truth that liberates. You're not obliged to eternally repeat these patterns. Jung insisted that destiny is not predetermined, but a product of conscious work. When you expand your awareness, reality changes. By choosing yourself, you discover that love doesn't have to be a struggle. Peace isn't an unattainable luxury. Your value needs no proof. It is a fact of your existence. And then, a true metamorphosis occurs. People who once manipulated you lose their leverage. Situations that once knocked you off balance no longer have the same power. The world hasn't changed. Your perception has. You stop seeking understanding from those who never tried to hear you. Stop breaking yourself to fit into places where you aren't welcome. Stop saving what belongs to the past. This is true freedom, not permissiveness, but inner independence. The ability to be alone without feeling empty. The confidence that whatever challenges life brings, you'll face them relying on yourself, whole and authentic, no longer needing fake crutches of others' evaluations. Your journey to yourself is the only journey where the destination matters more than the speed. Every step is a meeting with who you were, who you are, and who you can become. And however difficult this route may seem, it's the only one where, in the end, you'll find yourself. Genuine, without masks, without conditions, without needing to prove anything. Simply valuable enough to finally stop seeking salvation and start living. You will always be okay because you finally learned to be yourself. Jung said that individuation is the most important process of our existence, the path to wholeness. And although this path is often associated with pain, loss, and loneliness, only this path can lead to a meaningful life. When you start choosing yourself, when you decide to leave behind old versions of yourself, created to please others, life rewards you in unexpected ways. New people enter your life. Opportunities that once seemed unattainable open up. But most importantly, you find peace you never knew before because you stop fighting with yourself and seeking outside what has always been within you. At this moment, many feel as if they've finally awakened. Life ceases to be an act of survival or an attempt to please, turning into a space for genuine experience, creativity, and emotion. But the work doesn't end there. Consciousness, like a muscle, requires constant training because society, family, surroundings will try to drag you back to old patterns, make you doubt yourself, convince you that choosing yourself is selfish. The difference is that now you know the truth. There's nothing more valuable than your peace, nothing more important than your well-being. Ultimately, the only decisions that matter are those that bring you closer to yourself. The world changes when you change. Relationships improve when you improve the relationship with yourself. Opportunities arise when you stop acting from lack and start acting from fullness. Jung said the unconscious responds to our core beliefs. When you truly believe you deserve more, the universe reflects this. The question is, are you ready to see this? Are you ready to let go of what no longer resonates and open up to something completely new? It won't be easy, but I promise it's worth it. When you start living authentically, something incredible happens. What once seemed confusing becomes clear. Relationships that drained you now seem unbearable. Situations you tolerated now feel weighty. This is not a coincidence. It's growth, a sign that you're evolving and can no longer ignore what your soul has been whispering to you for years. Jung taught that consciousness is not static. It expands when we dare to look within. And when this happens, the world cannot remain the same because the external is but a reflection of the internal. If there's clarity within, it manifests outside. If there's chaos inside, you'll encounter it around you. When you choose yourself, you begin to attract experiences aligned with your new energy. You no longer need to force connections, beg for love, prove your worth. Everything flows naturally because you act not from a deficit, but from fullness. This transition doesn't happen overnight. There will be moments of doubt, when the temptation to return to the old will be strong, when loneliness will seem unbearable. But this is the test. Will you betray yourself out of fear of being alone? Or will you stand firm in your authenticity until what is truly meant for you comes along? The unconscious always tests us, not for punishment, but to prove our readiness for the next level. This is why, as soon as you start choosing yourself, people from the past may suddenly appear, trying to restore old dynamics. Life will present situations that once threw you off balance, not because you are regressing, but so that you confirm, this time I choose differently. When you pass this test, your energy changes fundamentally. You are no longer anchored in fear, not tied to the need for approval, not waiting for others to validate your path. And then the world responds in unexpected ways. Opportunities arise effortlessly. The people entering your life do so with respect and genuine interest. What once seemed unattainable becomes real, not because the world changed, but because now you believe you deserve it. At this moment, many feel like they've finally woken up. All the pain of the past makes sense. It led you to this moment. While suffering is never easy, looking back, you see every failure, every loss, every rejection was a disguised liberation. Jung reminded us that the unconscious doesn't forget but can heal. Past wounds don't disappear, but we change our relationship to them. They cease to be chains holding us back and become reminders of the path traveled. When you stop seeing your story as a series of failures and start viewing it as evolution, everything changes. The problem is that most people never reach this point. They get stuck in resentment, nostalgia, guilt, continuing to look back and wish things were different. But true strength isn't in what could have been, but in what you can build now. When you choose yourself, you stop living in the past. You no longer need to justify what happened or mourn what was lost. You simply accept everything happened as it should have, and each experience prepared you to be who you are today. And this is where life truly becomes exciting. When you free yourself from the burden of the past, you realize the future is entirely in your hands. There's no predetermined fate, only endless possibilities. The only question is what you will do with this freedom. Repeat old stories, or dare to write a new one. Most choose safety, preferring familiar suffering over the risk of being happy. But those who choose to live authentically, without fear of consequences, discover life offers far more than imaginable. When you choose yourself, the world chooses you too. When you value yourself, life responds in kind. When you let go of what doesn't serve you, what truly belongs to you finds a way to you. This is not magic or luck. It's a natural law of energy, a reflection of your growth, an inevitable outcome of the most important decision, to be true to yourself. When you finally choose yourself, life changes course. You no longer cling to pain, trying to make others appreciate you, living in anxiety about your adequacy, because you know deep down you are already whole. You don't need to seek outside what's always been inside. But this doesn't mean the path will be easy. There will be days of doubt when old wounds attempt to drown out your new voice, moments when the familiar will lure you back. The difference is, now you know the truth. Your peace is invaluable. Your well-being is non-negotiable. Your worth does not depend on others' opinions. And this changes everything. Jung taught, the goal of life is not superficial happiness, but fullness, and it can only be achieved by daring to be yourself, without masks, without fear, without chasing approval. Live from authenticity, embrace your light and shadows, understand each experience, no matter how difficult, has led you to this moment. When you come to this, you no longer need approval. You seek genuine connections. You don't want to fit in. You want to belong to a space where you can be yourself. And this is where true magic happens. When you live from your truth, you attract people and opportunities that truly resonate with you. If these words find a response within you, if at any point you felt they spoke directly to your soul, know this knowledge isn't just for you. The world is full of people stuck in painful patterns, searching outside for what can only be found within. You are not alone on this path. Each of your words can become a guiding light for someone just waking. Every choice you make a confirmation that living authentically is possible. Because when you choose yourself, emotional healing flows unobstructed, and your life becomes a reflection of your truth. Keep choosing yourself again and again. If this video resonates with you, leave this affirmation in the comments. I am worthy of choosing myself. Writing it down is a powerful step toward internal alignment. You begin to turn insight into transformation. It also shows us that our work truly matters to someone. We're already working on the next video to expand on this topic, so make sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Wishing you the best.